A Morehouse Parish woman is now one of 11 board members appointed by the State Economic Development Partnership, and the goal is to promote economic growth. Kenya Ross met with her today and joins us with more. Kenya?
Yes, Jennifer, I met with Meryl, the CEO of KNOE Rice Mill in Meryl earlier today. She spoke to me about how she and the family rice business of more than 60 years will represent Northeast Louisiana while sitting on the board. She's one of the 11 board members that was established by Act 590 in the 2024 legislative session, which is known as the Positioning Louisiana to Win bill. The board will meet for the first time beginning next week to talk about how they're going to begin developing a strategic plan on how the entire state can get in a position to see economic advancement.
The whole point of the bill is positioning Louisiana to win, not just part of Louisiana, but the entire state. And how can we all work together to make our state more powerful and to attract more jobs into the state, but also to really prioritize the businesses within the state and hopefully continue to invest in them as well.
And coming up tonight at 10, I'll share why KNOE thinks it's important to see more women in the agricultural industry. Jennifer?